What's going on, my fellow Kino Lords? So I just recently got out of a screening for The Menu, which is a film that stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Ralph Fiennes, and Nicholas Hoult. And this is a film that I'm just going to say, right out of the gate, I enjoyed very much. This is a film that I was quite surprised how much I enjoyed it, but I do think it's a film that gets better as it progresses. Because the first 10 or 15 minutes of this film, where the film is doing its best trying to establish these characters on this boat ride to the island where obviously the film's main conflict and the main setting is at, something about the way this film establishes its characters doesn't feel the most naturally convincing. There's just something kind of off about it. I think it's a combination of the direction and the writing, and perhaps some of the chemistry between the actors didn't quite feel all there. But once we get into this film's central conflict, everything really starts to click. Everything seems to work from a filmmaking standpoint in terms of its approach to humor, approach to horror. Everything about it just really clicks, and it's an incredibly entertaining experience. Pretty much the biggest compliment that I can give this film is that it's thoroughly entertaining. I mean, as I mentioned, once it gets going, which is in the first 15 minutes or so, it is never boring. And even really the first 10 or 15 minutes, they're not really boring either. There's still elements of it that are interesting, and your curiosity is still, very much invested into what's going to happen. And that's another huge compliment of this film, is that throughout your experience, you're very curious to know where all this is going to end up. And I do think that it delivers something by the end of the film that does feel like a genuine payoff. It does feel earned. The ending actually kind of gives me some Midsommar vibes, and when you see it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But what I think this film mostly excels at is actually its humor and its comedy, and also the suspense building. Because the humor in this film is actually pretty clever, and it's well thought out, and it's satirical in a lot of ways. A lot of the characters in this film are satirically comedic. I mean, you have the overly pretentious critic in this film. You also have a washed up actor character in this film that's played by John Leguizamo. And as the film progresses, I think his character gets just funnier and funnier as it goes along. But yeah, and then you have the character played by Nicholas Hoult, who is, Jesus Christ, he's a funny character, don't get me wrong. His character is quite humorous, but at the same time, it's also just so frustrating. It's comically annoying, because his character is I don't want to say he's like a food critic. He's more of like a food enthusiast, and his character is just he's so dug in, and he just buys all of the pretentious and kind of hoity-toity elements of food appreciation. And he's a character that is a bit of a know-it-all, but to the degree that he appreciates food and puts it on a pedestal, and the way that he's able to dissect it all, it's such a annoying thing to see throughout the film, but it's delivered in such a humorous way that I think is effective. And that pretty much goes for all the characters that are in this film. Anya Taylor-Joy plays the main character in this film, and obviously I really loved her character because she obviously represents the most normal human being, at least in comparison to everybody else that's involved here. And she's definitely the most relatable character to most people, and makes it to where we obviously do have somebody to root for throughout the entire experience, and someone to understand their line of thinking. I really like her character, and I think she gives a great performance. And her dynamic that not only she shares with Nicholas Hoult, but the dynamic that she shares with Ralph Fiennes, I think is built up to something that is very satisfying. And in terms of a narrative perspective, I do think that it is very well thought out, and by the end of the film definitely delivers on something that feels, again, as I mentioned way earlier in this review, earned and satisfying. Because not only does it build up to excellent character moments, but the themes in the film are hammered home in a way that I think is quite compelling. And I just love the way that this film essentially kind of shows you the more that a chef is kind of forced to elevate food and deconstruct it, that is purely only created and only exists for the purpose of luxury and exclusivity for the top 1%, and nothing more, nothing less. It makes it to where the passion and the love that one has for food is completely removed from the experience, and removes anything special that does come with human beings and food. And I love how that theme is expressed throughout the film, not only in its hilarious satire that we get, but also, as I mentioned, within the finale of it all. And again, I just thought it was a really funny and entertaining experience that does include compelling elements of suspense and a film that isn't afraid to be violent here and there. It's not the most violent film ever, but there are a few moments that, you know, I was a bit surprised that it kind of went all the way with depicting its graphic violence. But for the most part, the violence is pretty tame, so don't go in expecting a bloodbath or anything. Really, the biggest complaint that I could give this movie, aside from the fact that I really wasn't the biggest fan of the first 10 or 15 minutes of this film, is the fact that I really wish there was, like, I really think this film could have been elevated if there was more of a creative presentation to it. Because, I mean that in regards to maybe having more personality behind the camera overall. Because this film is, you know, in terms of direction and camera work and like even structure and everything, it's all very conventional. It's pretty traditional in that regard. And I mean, it works for what it's going for. This isn't really a film that demands to have, you know, the most boundary pushing presentation or anything. But I definitely believe that if this film had been either given the liberties to have more creative presentation or given to a director that was willing to kind of give his creative touches to it, it would have been a more unique film, and it would have made certain moments of this film a bit more impactful and interesting. So overall, I'm going to give The Menu a strong 7 out of 10. Yeah, I thought this movie was a lot of fun. I can see almost everybody finding some enjoyment in this film, so I would definitely say go check this out when you can. And that's all I really got to say. I just did a Criterion haul, so if you want to check that out, please do if you haven't already. And also feel free to join the Discord through $5 a month on Patreon. We're actually going to have a movie night tonight, and we're going to have a film discussion tomorrow, so I would love to have more people part of this amazing community. That's all I got to say about The Menu. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.